So we've all been through Chapel Perilous, right? And we've all either emerged paranoid or agnostic. Let's hope it's with the agnostics outweigh the paranoids today. We shall see. So I think without much further ado, I'm going to welcome to the stage Dr. Jabir. This is a gentleman who became a Muslim before 9/11 when it was still cool. And he's going to say a few... well, I don't know exactly what he's going to do. In fact, we shall leap together into the unknown, a fool's leap. And Dr. Jabir, here we are.
Thank you, Daisy. I'm going to be very brief. I'm only going to do a few things. One, I'm going to tell how I first met Bob Wilson. Is this thing working? Yeah. Fine. And then I'm going to say what Bob stole from me. And then I'm going to conclude. I first met Bob in Berkeley. My friend Saul Paul Sirag, who is a self-taught mathematical genius. Anyone know Saul Paul? Yeah, Saul Paul. Was living in Berkeley, and he said, "Hey, I want you to meet a friend of mine. He lives only a few blocks away." And he actually was the first person I ever met who made a living by writing. Well, we sort of a living. So he said, "Let's go over to Bob's house." So we went, we walked a 3 or 4 blocks, and we knocked on the door, and this beautiful red-headed woman answered the door, and she said, "Hello, I'm Arlen." And I said, "Marlon?" And she said, "No, Arlen." And she invited us in, and there was Bob watching TV with his children all around him. And then it became a regular thing. Whenever we felt like we needed a dose of Bob, we would walk the few or 4 blocks to Berkeley and see him. And there was always something going on. So that was how I first met Bob. Now, what Bob stole from me. As you may know, being in the presence of a writer, they always need material. So they're going to take stuff from you, whether you like it or not. They may even put you in one of their novels. So I was at Bob's house one day, and I said, "Bob, you used to work for Playboy, didn't you?" "Oh, yeah. We used to write some of the letters, both the questions and the answers to Playboy." I said, "Well, there's a question I've always wondered. I've always wondered about Playboy, and here it is, that due to modern technology, Playboy has been running a psychical research experiment that was impossible up until the present age. And here's what it is, this psychical research experiment. Every month, 1 million men masturbate to the image of the playmate of the month. What happens to her? What does she experience, during that month? You got any news for me on that, Bob? And Bob said, "No, as far as I know, it's just another month for them. They're pretty busy, though, you understand. But no one has ever, noticed that that month was special to them." So that was it. And then in Schrodinger's Cat, the 3-part novel Schrodinger's Cat, there's a woman named Carol Christmas. And Carol Christmas is a pussycat of the month. I forget what the magazine is called. Maybe it's called Pussycat. It's like Playboy. And now Carol Christmas, when it's her month, becomes a virtual sex goddess. No man can take his eyes off her, and she is filled with gigantic libido that whole month. She just must have sex, and men must have her. There are problems, it turns out, that it's not as easy as it looks. Bob makes it complicated. So that's what he stole from me. He stole the idea. It could have been called the Herbert effect. This when a million men masturbate to your image, what happens? But now I think it will have to be called the Carol Christmas effect, when a million men masturbate to your image. And whatever that effect is, it's still, science has not yet measured it. So there's one thing that you would have to say about Bob, is that he was creative. And so the next thing I'm going to end with, which Roz is going to follow me. Roz is living in Shasta, Mount Shasta, and cavorts with deer. I'll let your imagination, like a fawn, like those satyrs, you know. He's one of those kind of people, and he'll talk next. So this is a. I'm going to read something from one of my books, Physics on All Fours. This is the description of the creative process. And it's called Kiss My Bare Art. Kiss my bare art. We drink our muse. We smoke our muse. We duct her through our gaping pores. Invent new sins to fan her whims. We're lovely muses, lowly whores. We follow muse beyond the stars to bomb labs, muscle gyms, and porno bars. Where life beckons, there we go. Seek deeper meat than Jacques Cousteau. Nice rhyme, huh? We crave that rush, that punch, that flood. We love that dark orgasmic drain. Then pick ourselves up off the rug and open up another vein. For just one glance, we drop our pants, her prostitutes and renegades. Yet every kiss burns like the first. We're virginal as newborn babes.
I have to read because I can't remember anything. Mostly, I'd like to thank people. I've been working with Christina on Hilaritas Press, creating the press, and helping out in the trust since Bob died, pretty much. Thank you. I got to say thank you and just make a couple announcements for a few things. Gabriel Kennedy, also known as Propanon, Propaganda Anonymous, is coming out with a book this year. I don't know when it is exactly. Can you hear me okay? Chapel Perilous, The Life and Thought Crimes of Robert Anton Wilson. He's been researching that for a while, and I'm really excited to see that. Daisy Aris Campbell has created Cosmic Trigger the play, and that's been, yeah, she needs a round of applause. And that also has expanded the universe of the raw community dramatically, and which makes my work a lot easier, that's for sure. I also wanted to, really because of the play, the recent audiobook of Cosmic Trigger evolved, and I have to thank Daisy for turning us on to Oliver Senton, who did a brilliant job interpreting Bob in the book. It was kind of chilling for me. Not exactly Bob's voice, very close to a real Brooklyn accent, but the spirit is really there. And if you haven't heard it, get it. It's really, really, really wonderful.
What's the audiobook called?
Audiobook is called Cosmic Trigger, the audiobook. And Steve,
Real quick.
yeah,
I'm a third generation New York Irish Catholic
yes,
with white hair
and
who's interested to know if there's going to be a U.S. production.
I'm going to let Daisy talk about that when she gets up here later. I want to know the answer to that also. I want to mention Steve Fly Pratt, and if you haven't heard his name, maybe you've heard his name, but he's been involved. I mean, I can't believe that guy is so raw, enthused, that every week he sends me an email with a new project or a new idea, or, that cigarette company just ripped off Illuminatus, maybe you should tell Christina, that kind of stuff. So he's really on top of it. I should mention he created a website called Raw 360. It's kind of cool, exploring around in 360 view. He's also living with poet activist John Sinclair. I don't know if you know who that fellow was, who was in jail for his activities in Detroit years ago, and they're all in Amsterdam doing that. And he wishes he could be here, but he couldn't make it. I also want to thank just a few people quickly. Fearless Scott McPherson from Amoeba Design, who's designed all of the new covers for the Hilaritas Press editions of Bob's books, and many other cool graphics, and did stuff for you guys as well, right? Yeah. Amazing work, really good. In producing these books, we've wanted to expand them a little bit, enhance them a little bit, so we've asked people to write introductions or afterwards, and I just want to run through the list. It's only 4 so far. John Higgs for his new introduction to Cosmic Trigger, which I thought was really amazing. Richard Rasa for his new afterword for Prometheus Rising, and I won't talk about myself in the third person anymore. David J. Brown, where's David? Right there on the floor, for his new introduction to quantum psychology. And Mike Johnson, who kind of surprised me with an incredible piece, writing a new introduction, a new foreword for Email to the Universe. That was really cool. I also want to mention Toby Philpott. And maybe you guys don't know Toby Philpott, also known as alias Bogus. Toby's also one of those guys who just is so enthusiastic about Robert Anton Wilson, and I don't know, I mean, I don't really know the guy except through emails and, the last month or so. But at any rate, he's the one who wrote the history of the Maybe Logic Academy in one of our blog posts last year. He's a wonderful guy. I just wanted to mention his name, and I love his name, Toby Philpott. Yeah. Yeah. That's what I was going to say. That's the last thing here. Toby Philpott, AKA the head and left arm of Jabba the Hutt. No, and he's still doing tours, signing autographs for that. Who, Toby? Yeah, he's... No, yeah, I know what he looks like. No, he's not here. The couple things to mention, we're currently working on Coincidence and the 3 historical Illuminatus chronicles. We're trying to work on it all together, which is ridiculous, but we've got volunteers who are amazing. And I just want to mention a couple of them. Gary Accord, Chaz Ferris, and Tom Jackson have been doing editing and proofreading for us. Tom Jackson also runs rawillumination.net. And if you haven't been there, it's an incredibly good blog. Really interesting stuff, all raw related, one, tangentially sometimes a little distant, but really good, and his writing is really good. I want to make a really special thank you to that guy in the back of the room, Bobby Campbell, who not only has been so enthusiastic, yeah, please, so enthusiastic about Raw and helpful in so many ways. And I don't want to get into the topic too much, but of our kerfuffle with New Falcon Publications, Bobby ended up being the intermediary that has, I think, made it possible for us to be almost ready to end the negotiations. Yeah, right. But at any rate, I think without you, that would have been impossible, quite frankly. So thank you. Really, thank you. Lastly, Paul Krasner. We invited Paul to come, who is a dear friend of Bob's, and Paul's living in the desert in the south and is not traveling anymore. He said he really appreciated the invitation, but couldn't come. But I asked him if he had a word or two, and he did say, he said, if you don't know Paul, does everybody know Paul Krasner? I mean, okay, good. It's hard not to know that guy. He wrote, and he said just this. He actually wrote just this. I'm there in spirit. Bob may be raw, but he sure is well done. That's a Krasner kind of thing. So, I wanted, in the early 90s, Bob got his email set up for the first time. And I happened to be at his house when he couldn't get it to work, and I fooled around a little bit with his Mac, and he sent me an email after that, and it got through, and I sent him an email back. And then we started sending emails back and forth with different things. The first thing I sent him, yeah, I got your email, it works, seems like it's working now. Here's a bunch of chicken jokes I found online. And remember when email started out and it was just constantly sending something that someone else sent you back and forth and all that stuff. So he really enjoyed that, but he loved writing emails. And I think I got an email from Bob almost every day after that, unless he was ill or on the road for the rest of his life. And it's not just me, it was a few other friends who he just loved writing to. And when he figured out what CC meant in the email, he said, whoa. And anytime one of us would send him something he liked, he'd send it out to the rest of the group. And Gary Dreyfus from MIT, known as Dr. Fu, I think came up with the name Group Mind to describe that Bob's email list. I wanted to read a couple things from the Group Mind, just that I thought were cool. Before the Group Mind existed, actually, I wrote Bob an email. It was my birthday, and I was kind of waxing a little poetic, but I'll read you a little bit what I wrote and what his response was. I said, by the tick on my internal clock, the world began 45 years ago on January 7th. Charlie Parker filled the air with ear candy, cut from more than the typical 7 parts of a sound wave. In jazz, they call it going outside. I thought pretty much all of rock and roll was outside until I heard the mothers of invention. In an interview, Zappa said popular music was popular because 99% of every tune was completely predictable. The 1% that makes you remember the song is the little bit of original thought musicians call the hook. So Bob wrote back, Claude Shannon called it information. Ever since I read his Mathematical Theory of Communication, 1950, I have tried applying it to art as well as science and find it fits neatly. All great art seems weird, barbarous, noisy, or a bad joke at first because of its high information unpredictability. All popular art avoids this initial failure, unpopularity, by never including the unpredictable or high information content. Can you get an email from that guy and everything? I mean, he'd send an email out that someone else had sent him, and there was always like a paragraph or a line, a comment of his on the bottom that I always rushed to get to first. In Everything is Under Control, I wrote to Bob rather nervously because I had spoken to some German friends. I told him, in Everything is Under Control, I looked under Nazi hell creatures, but there is no commentary, and the hyperlinks don't lead to any other entries that describe the hell creatures. I must consider the possibility that the Illuminati control HarperCollins, and descriptions of the hell creatures are simply too dangerous to allow in print. I only ask because several German friends are intrigued by Hitler's attempts to harness the energy controlled by the hell creatures. Bob wrote back, I thought the Nazi hell creatures was one of my best jokes. If you follow the links and the links from the links, you'll get more and more sinister ideas about who or what they are, but you will never arrive at more than undefined anxiety. And along that same line, in 1996, my dear friend Marlies, who actually introduced me to Bob, we found this book that was written by a Dutch writer, Jan van Helsing, Secret Societies in the 20th Century. Thick, hardcover book. It's not his real name. He picked the vampire killer's name because he was afraid of the secret societies. So we gave Bob that book, and he hadn't seen it before. And sometime later, I asked him, sent him an email. I said, can these secret societies be simultaneously so successfully secret and also so slipshod that one can become an authority on them? And Bob wrote back, that, sir, is the nub of the matter. As Israel Regardie once told me, paranoia is a disease of the ego. To believe in any of these cosmic conspiracy tomes, one must believe that the conspirators are diabolically clever, but the author is even more clever than they are. And one note, this is sort of about the emails, but we visited Bob in the hospital when he had fallen from a bout of post-polio syndrome. He had a wild case of hospital hair, it was like sticking out like that. And I told him he looked like he'd just been plugged in. And he kind of like felt his hair with his hand, and he said, paused, and he said, I guess I have something in common with Einstein after all. I asked Bob if he had a message for the group mind when I was going to go home and write an email out. And he thought for a moment again and said, tell them I've learned a lot while in the hospital. I'm ready to write the sequel to Kafka's The Trial. Yeah. And one last thing. This is just something that he wrote, I think, to the group mind. Every so often he'd just write a letter to everybody, just sort of describing where he was at in the moment. This was in 1999 in May. In the dark, terrible months after my daughter's death, I often repeated to myself a favorite quote from Nietzsche. Whatever doesn't kill me makes me stronger. Then G. Gordon Liddy got out of prison, and I saw him on the TV coverage. Liddy walking to his car, reporters shouting questions. Liddy answering, no comment, no comment, no comment. Then, just before he got into the car, a reporter asked him, do you have any comment on the American prison system? Liddy replied, anything that doesn't kill me makes me stronger. I suddenly felt a deep empathy with him. Guess that's what the Romans meant by humanitas, and Buddhists call compassion for all living beings. Don't know much about acting, but writing novels sure teaches a lot of that. I've learned more creating/becoming my monsters and villains than I've learned creating likable characters. And that really makes me wonder what Bob would have thought of Trump. And so I'm going to stop right there. Okay, thanks.